So just to recap where we've been, the last couple of weeks we have been looking at our 4-part series that is taking us into that realm of confusion, where different ideas will come together and we will find what it is that we want to do going forward. And so we've done 2 weeks already. This is the 3rd week, as I mentioned earlier. The first one was on intent. That we have to understand who we are and what our intention is before we can even set a vision by it. Having our intention reviewed right now, which is because it's sort of what our Vision Works document is about, how we intend to be with one another, how we intend to be with the world, with other communities, with other groups of people, is stated in our Vision Works document. We have people working on that from within the local community and beyond. I know that we've got John in Scotland as part of that, and also, oh yeah, Doug in Woodstock is participating in that. So we've got our broader community is participating in putting together a new Vision Works. So that really fills out that intent part. Who do we intend to be? How is it we want to be in the world? And out of that, the vision for who we want to be can come to the fore. But today we're talking about action, because vision is just fine, but if you don't do anything about it, then you don't really get anywhere. And next week we'll talk about clarity, which is maybe a refining of the action, the sort of response to what you've felt has happened as a result of the action. We'll be a few months ahead of ourselves when we're talking about clarity, but the point is to put it in place so that it's part of the practice as we're trying to figure out what the future looks like for West Hill United Church. There was a quote that I had from Carl Jung that says, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." And so action is where we get to in terms of our intentions and our vision. Action is, thank you. Action is, sorry, you can sit down. Oh, sorry. I have Scott sort of a second person adding people into the waiting room, so he jumped up to do that, and someone else had did it, so thank you. Did it? I didn't say that. So.
Got Greta on here now, George.
Oh, thank you, Eileen. Maybe somebody could mute everybody else. Sorry. So we're talking about doing what we want to do instead of just talking about it. Today we're talking about action. I got muted too, so here I am back again. So in the song, the message that Alessia was bringing is a message that there are people out there who are dramatically different from the going group, from maybe the popular group or the dominant group or the group that has the say in what's going to happen. There are people out there who we could consider having nothing to do with anything. But they will consider that they have a lot to do with them and with their lives and what it is they want to be. And they consider themselves to be outside, perhaps, of the norms of the culture. When we were looking at our conversation last week about vision, the big question that I asked was, who do we describe ourselves as, and who is beyond us? Who, if we described ourselves in a certain way, what is the alternative to that description? And how do we open ourselves to understanding what that alternative is? We're a congregation that has been in place since the 1940s, in this particular spot since 1950. And well known in this spot since 1946, I believe, in the United Church of Canada since 1950. We have established ourselves in this community as a United Church amidst many United churches in the Scarborough area, all of whom were filled in the early 1950s and early 1960s with a largely white suburban population that had moved into this area. And so last week when we talked about vision, I was helping us to see beyond who it is that's within these walls and who is outside of these walls, who may consider themselves, as Alessia says, uncomfortable coming into the way that we think things should be happening here. So, you know, you have to sit down in a certain way, you have to be quiet, you have to play according to the rules. And our question today is, if we are going to act on the vision that becomes compelling to us, how are we going to do that in a way that allows those who are outside of this community to feel welcome here? Tim Wise has said that standing still is never an option, so long as inequities remain embedded in the very fabric of culture. And we have recognized that over the course of the last many months, and long before that, but over the course of the last many months, the voices that have been addressing the inequities have become so loud that for us to ignore them would require deep ignorance and intentionality on our part. If we want to respond to those inequities and to try to create equity, not just in our church, our community, but in the systems in which they function, there is much that we must do. Action is something that we need to take on. Some of the inequities that we are very familiar with are the inequities related to our Indigenous communities and Indigenous peoples in this country. We often look at other countries and we look at the challenges that they face and the inequities in their systems, and it's easy for us to point fingers. I said yesterday in a conversation, you know, we had watched a film on race in the United States and on how it came to be that for every white family in the United States that has $100, a black family would have about $5.08. And that's through a system that has developed over the course of a couple of generations, maybe three, particularly around redlining districts that had access to education and the funding of those districts through taxes. And the taxes, if a community was predominantly white, the taxes were higher because the people were wealthier, and so they had higher paid teaching staff, smaller classrooms, higher success rates. In the districts that were black, where blacks couldn't get mortgages, and so they had less money, they were less able to build large houses, the taxes were lower, fewer teachers, badly paid, more kids, you get the picture. And I said, well, we don't have redlining in Canada, but we do have racial inequities. And then someone responded and said, yeah, but we have reservations. Of course we have reservations, which is the equivalent of redlining, particularly when it comes to education. And I have stood with people in this community arguing for education payments to be made per capita that are equivalent in our Indigenous communities as they are for the rest of the population. And we have not yet achieved that. So we are in very much the same system. The question is, how do we take those inequities that have been bred into our society and unravel them? How do we get white families in the United States to say, okay, so let's take that, you know, the mean between $5.08 and $100 is this, so I'll give this much money up and we'll eventually get to the place where we have some equity. One of the presenters yesterday used the photo. There's a cartoon picture actually of the difference between equality and equity. And it's a picture of a wall, and there are three people behind the wall, one who's tall, one who's medium height, and one who's very short. And equality means giving each of them a stool so that that's the same height, so that the tall person can see well over the wall, the middle-sized person can sort of peer over the wall, but the short person still can't see. Equity is where you give them each a stool that allows each of them to look over the wall. So equity is what we're looking for, not equality. So the question is, what is it that we do in this community of faith that can actually help a system shift itself toward equity? That's an enormous task. And so the question is one that is almost ridiculous when we're talking about a single community of faith. And yet that's exactly what we need to set our sights on in order that we make sure that the action that we take will get us somewhere along that course and to be part of the process of providing stools of varying heights to various populations within our community. The second reading is exactly the opposite of Gandhi's reading. Gandhi says that it's the action, not the fruit of the action, that's important. But if anyone has ever had a baby, you know that it's actually the fruit of the action, the actually giving birth and having the baby. That fruit is the important thing. It's not the process. So there's a serious collision there. Iris Young was an incredible professor of social theory and a feminist, and was well respected even in her early years of writing for the work that she did and the voice that she brought particularly to gender studies. She died very early at the age of 57 of cancer, and her voice was one that had much more to bring to us. But the story the reading that I brought to you, which is about birth and the consequences of birth upon the woman, not on the child, and the experience of change, I thought were very profound for where we are now. The process of becoming impregnated with an idea is one that is sometimes momentary. It can take place almost immediately, or it can take place over a long period of time. It's something that our eyes might come to see because scales fall from them, or it could be something that becomes clear to us as our understandings and our exposure to a perspective is cleared over the course of time. So becoming impregnated with an idea can be a process or a flash. But once it comes, the process of birthing it then becomes the chore of the host that has that vision, that idea. We are that host. West Hill United Church is the host for an idea. We're not really sure what the actual idea is yet. I think we're in the process of clearing the fog away from what that idea might be. But over the course of the last year, we've had some significant conversations and seen some enormous change ourselves that might bring us closer to what that is. And over the course of the past 15 years, we've had incredible conversations that have given us a perspective that is unique in most Christian churches, possibly in the United Church, though there are others that are basing their work more closely on values than beliefs, as we do. But it has given us a unique perspective that we can take beyond this space out into the community, and that makes permeable the walls of our space in a way that many churches are not. All churches would say that they are bringing a message to the community. All churches would say that they have a job to do in terms of healing people's hearts or bringing them to a belief system that will alter their lives in a significant way, whatever that belief system is. Every mosque has that job to do. Every synagogue undertakes that work. We are part of a tradition that involves change. It involves changing people's hearts. It involves changing their worldview. It involves changing the way they interact with the world. That's what church and synagogue and mosques and healing circles are all about. They're about changing us so that we act differently in the world in a way that is consistent with our beliefs. But West Hill has stepped beyond beliefs to values, so that we can convict ourselves by the values that we hold, and regardless of the beliefs that we bring to those values, we are going to live differently in the world. So we're still changing because we are challenged to do so by the values that we have articulated as being crucial and central to our being human. So when I say that we have more permeable walls, it's because those values are valid and important beyond this place in the way that religious beliefs may not be. Or at least, if we were a religious community and we believed our beliefs were that important outside, we would take them out, but the people outside might not consider them to be that important. However, the concept of values is something that we take to a community, and community receives values because they see them independent of any belief system, but that they have something to do with their own personal relationships, with the relationships that they have with the community around them, and with individuals within that community, and the relationships that they have with institutions and systems that function in that community as well. So values have a way of seeping beyond the walls of a building like West Hill into the community beyond. And they've been doing it since any one of you became connected with this church. You have taken the values that have been West Hill. They might have stretched and poked you a little bit, and they annoy me like crazy sometimes. But still, you take them and you go out into your community and you live according to those values. And when you don't, you convict yourself, or someone like your partner convicts you and says, you know, this isn't actually how we say we're going to live. And indeed, over the past week or so, Scott and I have had that conversation about some of the challenges about how we are with other people in community at West Hill, and our intentional need to set to the work of repairing and reviving relationships that have broken down for whatever reason. That's the challenge that we set ourselves as a community that lives on values and that is called to live those values out. We convict ourselves when we fall short of them. The birth process, though, changes not just the child as it grows. It changes the host. It changes the mother, who comes to see and understand the world in a different place, to see as a different place than one that just accommodated her, but one that must care for her child. As I was choosing videos for today, one of the searches that I went was songs about birth, and the number of artists who have recorded songs, written and recorded songs about the life-changing nature of birth, and how having a child has become such a profound influence upon their work and their career and the way they see life. Those of us who are mothers know that. Many of those of you who are fathers will know that as well. But the world changes when we give birth. But as the reading suggests, we change too, right? We change in our relationship with the child and with the world around us. And when the idea goes out into the world, when the child goes out into the world, it's something different for us. And how do we then manage how it lives itself out in the world? We don't have control over that when it is no longer inside us, gestating, when we're no longer putting the bones and the skin on it ourselves. Once an idea is born, it can be shifted and changed and altered by anyone. They have the power to take it and make it their own by adding their own perspective, their own wisdom, their own place where they are in the social matrix, and shifting and changing it to accommodate them. Our ideas can be informed by what we've been through, and they can also be informed by our conversations. Over the course of the last 10 years, we've had vibrant voices sitting at our board table. We've had incredibly wise people speak to our congregation. We've brought the voices of poets and singers and politicians and artists. We've brought social change makers. We've brought people who spoke to us of compassion and being kind. We have brought people into our space to talk to us about the values that we hold dear. And we've been changed by those people. Lately, we've been challenged by them as well. Because a community that we are now in relationship with in a significant way, and that's the arts community here in Scarborough, who we invited in to have a conversation and who then challenged us to create for them a space that could support emerging artists in this community. And we rallied around that idea. We didn't let it spend much time in the gestation period because it was such a great idea. We decided we would just run with it. And as we then came into relationship with the Boys and Girls Club and went through the process of negotiating the sale of our property to them, we held on to that idea of the performing arts, and we shared it with them, and they seem to be embracing that idea now, putting it in amongst their own things and gestating something new themselves. And that doesn't mean that we let go of the idea that we've been birthing or what we might do of it, but we do continue to allow it to shape who we are and what it is we want to do. The greatest of which was to challenge us to hear the voices of those who are outside our community. That's the biggest challenge. When we gather and we talk about who we want to be, and we imagine what the future looks like, we're sitting in a room or we're sitting with a bank of screens in front of us, and they are people we know. There are people we've talked to, some for years, some of them more recently, but we know the language. We are the birthers of the idea. We hold the idea of who West Hill is. We've lived with that and nurtured it, and it has been ours lo these many years. And we have used it to decide how we want to be together and what programs we want to do, what books we want to study, what conversations we want to have, how we want to write that Vision Works document over again. We're comfortable with those pieces of work. We've done them before and before and before. Each time, something new coming out of them, but coming out of us. So if the conversations that we have brought people into this space who have seen who we are and what we do, who have taken the idea that we consider ours, taken it into themselves and seen possibility and hope and opportunity, would we want to say, no, you need to leave that at the door? No, that stays here, thank you very much. No, our walls are permeable because of who we are. And because of who we are, we have to have those conversations beyond these walls. When it comes to action, we cannot simply act ourselves. We must choose the actions wisely and choose them with the people who have invited themselves into our conversation and who have taken our conversation out into the community. Who do we want to be? Who do we want to share our ideas with? How do we want to see them come to birth? How do we want to see them change that community out there, which then will change us again? How can we find ways to be different than who we are and have been all this time? I think I've just told you a story of every church in the United Church of Canada. I think I've told you a story of every church that has built itself up in a community it knows intimately and well and has served beautifully over the years. I think I've told you a community that can, or I've told you about a community that can change because of the people that come inside its walls and who articulate its mission and its vision and decide what it's going to do. I think I've told you the story of those communities as they have peppered this country and created the social democracy that is Canada, been a significant part of that story. But I think I'm also telling you that it can't be just us anymore. And I don't know how to include those voices in a way that would be considered graceful. I don't know how to invite the community to those conversations in a way that doesn't close us in on ourselves and make us defensive. I don't know how we open our doors and our walls fully and say, come, spill that back into us. Spill the idea of who we might be for you. Spill that all over us until we're so drenched with it that we can feel a difference, a significant difference. Because if we don't drown in a new idea, if we don't drown ourselves in something that can come to be, we will simply drown. I think that there's a lot of United Churches that have done that. And I'm not dumping on them for having done that. I think that there are all kinds of social challenges and changes in demographics and movements to urban settings, urban centers rather than rural centers that have closed hundreds and hundreds of churches across this country. And I know that those churches have been the center of the community for decades while they did their work. But I think they drowned because they didn't have a community around them that could hear the story. Either that community died as it moved to everyone moved to the city, or that community changed as our community has and no longer saw themselves as being welcome. Or that community was simply resistant to a belief system that was not its own and had not grown up in its own blood and bone. But we are not that community. We have not lost the people around us. The population around us has done nothing but grow over the past decades. And we have not a belief system that can be simply rejected by people because it's a non-exclusive system. The system of values doesn't exclude based on beliefs. That's the whole point. But we do have people around us who don't stand up and sit down and sing songs the same way that we do. We do have people around us who have a different language, a different way of expressing themselves. We do have people around us who wouldn't understand some of the things that we do, but would resonate with why. So what is our action? What is it we have to do? How do we take that first step and let who they are seep into who we are, so that we might dance in the joy of what might come as we watch our idea birthed by others whose names we may not even be able to pronounce, but whose joy in the birthing is full and rich and true. Our next song is a song about surrender. The white flag is how we surrender, how we give up the fight, how we stop because we can no longer bear to go on, because the losses are too great, because the world is shifting and we can't change it anymore. We wave a white flag. You know what waving a white flag means. It means the end. But the song that's going to play for you is by a group of women called Joseph. And I've played this song, I'm sure I've played this song before in this space, but it's not called Wave the White Flag. It's called Burn the White Flag. And that's what I'm challenging you to do. Don't give up who you are. Let who you are be taken over and birthed in others. Burn the white flag of surrender and grab hold of whatever flag is needed to make the change in this place.